The smashed camera lay on the sand among the garbage. It was kicked and passed by. A month later, the man who finally returned and picked it up inserted the memory card into his computer and saw the last minutes of someone else's life, captured seconds before everything disappeared. Today is the second part of the photographs taken right before the catastrophe. The guy with a dandelion behind his ear who had 10 minutes left. A family smiling in the cabin of an airplane. A racer who already knew that the track kills. I left the story about that camera on the beach for the very end. It explains why these photographs even exist. You are on the Top Facts channel. I wish everyone a pleasant viewing. Selfie against the background of a train. October 2011, Spanish Fork Canyon in the state of Utah. A place where people come to look at the autumn mountains, and the rails there run right along the walking areas. 3 girls are walking along the cliffs. Essa and Kelsey, both 15, and Kelsey's younger sister, Savannah, she is 13. A low rumble builds up on the right. A freight train comes out from around the bend, and the girls decide this is the shot. They stand by the tracks, take a selfie against the background of the passing wagons, and Savannah immediately posts the photo on the social network. The caption under the picture is something like, "Standing right by the train, this is amazing." This is the last thing she managed to do in her life. The train nearby was rumbling so much that it drowned out everything around, including the second train, which was coming towards them on the adjacent track. The girls stood with their backs to it. The train driver later told he saw them for about 12 seconds. All these seconds he pressed the horn and did not let go, and his partner screamed in the cabin. Useless. A freight train at a speed of 90 kilometers per hour has a braking distance of more than 1.5 kilometers even after emergency braking. 1.5 kilometers. That is 15 football fields in a row. This one was going slower, about 60. Even this was not enough. That photograph was later examined carefully. In the upper right corner of the frame, lights are visible. These are the headlights of the second train. It is already in the frame, already very close. The girls look into the lens and do not know about it. A separate side of such stories is the locomotive crews. The train driver and his partner saw everything from beginning to end and could do nothing but honk. With such cases, railway workers then live their whole lives. The picture spread across the whole country. Railway workers still show it in schools when they explain why one must not be near the tracks, even with working ears and open eyes. A train that is coming straight at you almost does not grow in size. The brain simply does not have time to understand how close it is. According to the data of the American railways, hundreds of pedestrians die on the tracks of the country every year, and almost always the scenario is one. The person is sure that they will hear the train. Between this picture and everything else, 12 seconds passed. Figure under the cliff. In the year 2016, a Reddit user under the nickname Sliced Up Beef posted a thread in the section about the creepiest things. The story is as follows. She and her friend went to the Dundas Peak observation deck. This is a rocky cliff over a gorge in Canadian Hamilton, province of Ontario. A postcard place. A 40-meter waterfall is nearby. In the autumn, the whole slope burns red, and the line for that very ledge stretches for hours. A few days before the girls, the friend's cousin visited there and posted a picture from the observation point. A girl on the edge of the ledge over the abyss, a classic shot of Dundas Peak, of which there are thousands on the net. The girls liked the view, they repeated the route, and took turns taking pictures at the exact same spot. A month later, the friend wrote to her with strange news. She was comparing the frames and noticed something on the cousin's picture that is not on any other. Far below the edge of the trail, on the slope, where physically there is nothing to stand on. It is too steep. A thin figure is visible. A person stands unnaturally straight, close to the rock, arms along the body, and they have no face. The thread gathered thousands of comments and spread across websites about the unexplained. The post was analyzed pixel by pixel. People enlarged the fragment, cranked up the contrast, applied filters. The figure did not fall apart, but only became clearer. Skeptics answered, "These are just rocks. The shades of the head and legs are found in the neighboring cliffs. Possibly." The cliffs there are indeed layered. Light and dark stripes alternate all over the wall, except the torso of the figure is wider than any section of the cliff nearby. The black color of the head and legs is not repeated in the surrounding stones at all, and most importantly, nowhere else on the entire wall do the stripes fold into a person with their arms at their seams. The second version, a lost tourist, on a slope without a trail and without a foothold, standing at attention. The third version was spoken in a whisper. Over the years, the cliff has taken more than one life. People fell both here and at the neighboring waterfall, and someone saw in the figure one of the dead. There is no confirmation for any of the three. The figure got into a single frame and did not appear anywhere else again, neither on the girl's photographs nor on thousands of other people's pictures from this point. Today, people are allowed onto Dundas Peak by appointment only, not because of the figure, because of the crowds of people wishing to recreate that very picture. Man with a box. The man in the picture holds a box as if he is carrying lunch to a picnic. A light shirt, a smile, tropical sun. Inside the box, the plutonium core of a bomb that in a few days will wipe half a city off the map. The man's name is Harold Agnew. He is 24 years old, an American physicist. In 1942, he stood in a Chicago laboratory next to Enrico Fermi when the first controlled nuclear chain reaction in history was launched. 3 years later, Agnew ended up in the group that assembled the first atomic bombs. The photograph was taken in the summer of 1945 on the Pacific island of Tinian. At that time, it was the largest airbase in the world, and it was there that the Alberta detachment worked, responsible for the assembly and delivery. The core was brought to the island by a separate transport plane in a special container, and in the picture, Agnew is just carrying this container across the base. In his hands is the heart of Fat Man, the bomb that on the 9th of August will be dropped on Nagasaki. From 40,000 to 80,000 people will die, according to various estimates. Fat Man was about 1.5 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. A part of the city then was covered by the surrounding hills, otherwise there would have been even more victims. The most uncomfortable thing in the picture is the everydayness. People in shorts, someone squinting from the sun. By its look, a country trip, and not work with the most destructive cargo on the planet. Nobody is posing. Everyone is just doing their job. The photograph has a continuation. On the 6th of August, 3 days before Nagasaki, Agnew was flying on an escort plane, right behind the Enola Gay, the bomber that carried the first bomb to Hiroshima. His plane dropped measuring instruments to evaluate the power of the explosion. And also, Agnew took a personal cinema camera with him. Without any order, just took it. From the porthole, he filmed the rising mushroom, and this is the only aerial cinema footage of the Hiroshima explosion that exists. These few seconds of film have since entered almost every documentary film about that war. The bomb on Nagasaki itself was later carried by another aircraft, the Bockscar. After the war, Agnew headed the laboratory in Los Alamos, where he once started as a regular employee, lived to be 92 years old, and died in 2013. About his participation, he spoke evenly and without anguish until the end of his life. There was a war, and he did what he considered necessary, and the core from that box weighed a little more than 6 kilograms, less than a cat. Extra face at the celebration. For 8 years, this picture lay in a family album, and no one noticed anything. In 1999, Joe Martinez from Colorado came with his wife Patty to the golden wedding of relatives. 50 years of marriage, a full house of guests. The spouses were photographed hugging. The photo was printed, put away in the album, and forgotten. In 2007, Joe and Patty were flipping through the album and stopped at this frame. From behind Joe's left shoulder, a muzzle is peeking out, baring its teeth with flattened ears looking like a dog's. The problem is that there was no dog at that celebration. Both spouses are sure of this, and none of the guests remembers it either. Joe and Patty decided, it is a demon. It sounds like an overreaction. But then the story takes a turn you do not expect. All the years after that party, Joe struggled with a severe addiction. And in the tooth-bearing muzzle behind his shoulder, he saw its portrait. He got so scared that he quit. Completely. Now he carries the picture with him wherever he goes, as a reminder of what stands behind his back if he relapses. The story was picked up by American television, and the Martinez family told it on air without a shadow of a doubt. Photo expert John Davenport studied the frame and found no montage. The picture is real, the film is untouched. Skeptics answer with one word: pareidolia. This is what they call the property of the brain, to see faces where there are none. In wallpaper patterns, in car headlights, in the folds of curtains. The most famous case is the face on Mars. In 1976, the Viking station photographed a Martian hill in which the whole world saw a stone physiognomy. And later high-resolution pictures showed an ordinary mountain with ravines. It is easier for the brain to make a mistake an extra time than to miss a real face. This is how evolution tuned us. Perhaps the muzzle was formed from someone's hairstyle and a shadow. Since then, the picture has been wandering through collections of unexplained photographs, and every new viewer first of all looks for whose hairstyle and what shadow this muzzle could have been assembled from. But what exactly it was formed from, in all these years no one has clearly shown. More than a quarter of a century has passed since that golden wedding. Joe still carries the photograph with him. Geologist in a lounge chair. A lounge chair, sun, an open notebook on his knees. The person in the photo smiles as if he is on vacation. This is David Johnston, a volcanologist of the United States Geological Survey. He is 30 years old. 13 hours remain until his death. And this frame was taken by a person who was supposed to sit in that lounge chair instead of him. Johnston grew up in Illinois, graduated in geology with highest honors, defended his doctorate at the University of Washington. In 1978, he was hired by the Geological Survey to look for signs by which a volcano gives itself away before an eruption. 2 years later, such a sign appeared. Mount St. Helens in the northwest of the United States of America, 2,500 meters high, shuddered from an earthquake for the first time in 123 years. Johnston arrived as one of the first. Then, worse, the northern slope of the mountain began to swell like an abscess and grew by about 1.5 meters per day. The mountain changed shape right before the observer's eyes. Johnston studied volcanic gases and loved his work to the point of carelessness. It happened that he descended with instruments right into the active crater. On the 17th of May, 1980, he arrived at observation post Coldwater 2, 9 kilometers from the mountain, to relieve his assistant Harry Glicken, who needed to leave for an interview in California. Glicken snapped a picture of his boss in the lounge chair as a farewell, an ordinary photo from a shift change. The next morning at 8:32, the mountain exploded. Johnston managed to transmit 4 words on the radio: "Vancouver! Vancouver! This is it!" Colleagues later remembered. There was no terror in his voice, but the excitement of a scientist who had finally waited. The northern slope entirely collapsed downwards. This is still the largest landslide in recorded human history. Blazing gases rushed right after it at a speed of near 500 kilometers per hour. In 6 minutes, 600 square kilometers around the mountain, 10 Manhattans, turned into a scorched desert. Ash fell that day in 11 states, and the total energy of the eruption was later compared to hundreds of atomic bombs. Johnston's body was not found. Only in 1993, road workers accidentally dug up the wreckage of his trailer. 56 more people died that day, but the count could have gone into the thousands. It was Johnston and his colleagues who insisted that the zone around the volcano be closed to tourists in advance and did not yield to the pressure of those who demanded to open it. The closed zone saved lives, though not all of those who were inside. The owner of the tourist base at the lake under the mountain, 83-year-old Harry Truman, namesake of the president, flatly refused to leave. He had lived there for more than half a century and told journalists that the mountain would not touch him. He stayed in the house with 16 cats and managed to become a local celebrity. The base disappeared in the very first minute of the eruption. After the year 1980, the entire volcano observation system in the United States of America was rebuilt. Today, St. Helens is monitored around the clock by dozens of sensors, and when the mountain woke up again in 2004, there was not a single casualty. Post-Cold Water 2 is now called Johnston Ridge, and Harry Glicken, that very assistant who took the picture and left 13 hours before the explosion, died 11 years later on the Unzen volcano in Japan. In the entire history of the United States of America, 2 American volcanologists have died from eruptions, teacher and student. Red hair in the frame. The story about the 77 calls is still ahead. It will close this episode. But for now, California, 2019. 3 friends are climbing over the boulders near a waterfall near Santa Barbara and photographing each other. Ordinary frames from a walk, rocks, water, satisfied faces. Later, one of them, a guy under the nickname Gadela, will post one of these photographs in a thread about the creepiest things people have seen on hikes. Because away from the main foreground on the picture, there is a female face, distorted by pain. The woman's name was Sailor Gilliams. She was 22. This trail in general is of the unkind sort. County rescuers pull people off it every season. The day before, she went to this very waterfall with a friend, Brendan Vega. On the way back, it got dark, and they strayed off the trail. Sailor jumped off a rock in the dark, landed unluckily, and broke her leg. Vega picked her up and carried her in his arms. Then he slipped himself, broke his elbow, and shattered her ankle. Now she could not even crawl. Vega settled her between the rocks, left her his jacket, and went down for help, and did not return. Sailor called for help all night until she lost her voice. By morning, she almost did not understand where she was. During the day on Monday, the trail stood empty, except for those 3 with the camera. They were photographing rocks and water a couple of dozen meters from her and did not see her at point-blank range. The gray clothes blended in with the boulders. Chance saved her. A girl from their company, Nicole, caught a bright spot out of the corner of her eye among the gray. Red hair. Natural red. The rarest hair color on the planet. 1 or 2 people out of 100 have it. On that Monday, this rarity was worth a life. They approached, and there was a living person, delirious, without a voice, but alive. The doctors later counted fractures, dehydration, and deep hypothermia. The nights in these canyons are cold even in the spring. The friends dialed the rescue service, and a helicopter lifted Sailor on a cable on the same day. The rescuers said later that the count was no longer in days, but in hours. Brendan Vega was found lower down on the trail. That same night, he fell from a height in the darkness. The help he was walking for, he needed himself, and no one turned out to be around. Already at home, Gadela reviewed the pictures and understood. Sailor is in 2 frames. They circled near her longer than it seemed to them. All this time, she lay a few steps away and could not make a sound. That soundless scream on the photograph. It is her calling them. Sailor underwent surgeries, learned to walk again, and still goes to the mountains to this day, but now, according to her words, only on the trail, not a step to the side. Stairway to Heaven. This trail has been officially closed since 1987. This did not stop thousands of people from climbing over the fence. Fines frightened very few. The Haiku Stairs on the Hawaiian island of Oahu, 3,922 steel steps along the ridge of a mountain range, in places less than half a meter wide, and below them a drop of 600 meters. The military built it back in 1942 to service the antenna of a secret radio station that communicated with submarines. The radio station is long gone. Only a concrete bunker remains of it on the peak, but the stairs remained, and the people nicknamed it the Stairway to Heaven. Those wishing to climb came to the foot before dawn at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to slip past the security. The residents of the valley at the foot wrote complaints for years. Strangers walked through their yards in the middle of the night all year round, from all over the world. On the 26th of February 2015, 17-year-old Dalen Pua told his relatives that he was going exactly there. He was visiting his grandmother, and she tried to talk him out of it as much as she could. Everyone on the island knows about these stairs. She did not talk him out of it. At first, everything went not bad. On the way up, Dalen photographed the views and sent the pictures to his family, judging by the frames. He had already climbed high. Around 11 in the morning, the pictures stopped. He did not return home. They searched seriously. Honolulu firefighters, volunteers with drones, even military sailors. Helicopters ironed out the ridge for several days. 5 days later, the official searches were curtailed. Not a trace. And then the family once again reviewed Dalen's last photographs. On one of the frames, slightly lower down the slope, a figure is visible in the bushes. A man. He is crouching and seems to be looking in the direction of the camera, maybe a random tourist. Someone suggested that it is a hunter. Feral pigs are shot in the thickets on these slopes. But Dalen disappeared shortly after this frame. The Honolulu police published the picture and asked the man himself or anyone who recognizes him to respond. No one responded. Who he is and what he was doing on the closed trail remains unknown to this day. There is also a second detail. On the 2nd of March, a day before the end of the searches, 5 tourists on the trail heard a scream. One voice, twice, "Help!" and "I am here down below." That is what the tourists themselves told. A recording does not exist. The area was combed through. Empty. The official version is simple. Dalen stumbled, fell to the side of the trail, was alive for some time, but they did not manage to find him. The version matches in almost everything, except for one thing. These slopes continue to be searched for years. The family and volunteers returned there again and again. Not a body, not a backpack, not a shred of clothing. The mountains seem to have closed this topic. This also decided the fate of the stairs themselves. In 2021, the Honolulu City Council voted for demolition. In the spring of 2024, they began to cut the steps off and remove them by helicopters, section by section. The works cost the city millions of dollars. Now the stairway to heaven is no more, just like the answer to the question of what happened on it in February 2015. Bus. On the trail. The driver looked at his backpack and offered to buy him proper gear. The guy refused. April 1992. Alaska, the last hitchhike in the life of Christopher McCandless. 2 years prior to this, Christopher graduated from Emory University in Georgia, a good student from a wealthy family, and a person who considered modern society poison for people. After graduation, he transferred all his savings, $24,000, to the charity foundation Oxfam, took a new name, Alexander Supertramp, a vagabond of the highest caliber, and disappeared from his former life. He did not write a single letter to his parents. For 2 years, they did not know if their son was alive. He roamed across America on foot and by hitchhiking, descended on a canoe along the Colorado River all the way to Mexico, worked odd jobs on a grain elevator or at gas stations. He had to abandon his car in the desert after a sudden flood, and the remaining cash he, according to the testimony of his diaries, simply burned. By April 1992, Christopher reached Fairbanks in Alaska and asked for a ride to the Stampede Trail, a remote route for the most prepared. He did not look prepared. 4.5 kilograms of rice, a weak small caliber rifle, an armful of books, and a schematic road map from which one cannot understand the terrain. He brushed off the driver's help, took only a pair of rubber boots which the man almost forcibly handed him, and went into the taiga alone. There he stumbled upon the abandoned bus number 142, an old city bus that had once been dragged into the wilderness as housing for road workers, and set up camp in it. Kept a diary, took pictures of himself, recorded every catch, mostly berries and small game. On the 43rd day, he shot a moose, but could not preserve the meat. After 5 days, it went rotten, and Christopher called this in his diary one of the greatest tragedies of his life. In July, he tried to walk back out to the road. It did not work out. The river, which he had calmly crossed in April over ice and shallow water, had swollen from meltwater and turned into a roaring torrent. He returned to the bus. The most bitter part will become clear later. Less than 1 kilometer from the place where he stood, a manual suspension cable was stretched across the river. On a normal map, it is marked. Christopher did not have a normal map. By the 94th day, the entries change. A terrible weakness, which he links to wild potato seeds. Another 6 days later, he writes that he is trapped in the wild nature and is too weak to get out. Approximately then, his last photograph was taken. An emaciated person smiles into the camera and holds a note. I have had a happy life and thank the Lord. Goodbye, and may God bless all. The last entry in the diary, day 107, 2 words, beautiful blueberries. Then blank pages. Hunters found the body in the bus on the 6th of September 1992. Christopher weighed 30 kilograms, a third of the weight of an average American. The cause is still argued about to this day, pure starvation or a toxin from those very seeds, which does not allow an exhausted organism to absorb food. The story of Christopher was made famous by the book of journalist John Krakauer, Into the Wild, and the movie of the same name in 2007. Krakauer grabbed onto the seed versions seriously. For years, he gave them to laboratories, and the analyses eventually showed a toxic amino acid in the seeds. Dangerous exactly for an exhausted organism. This did not put an end to it. Critics consider the concentration too small. And meanwhile, pilgrims from all over the world flocked to the bus. The road to it passes through that very river, and it collected its toll. People were regularly rescued by rescuers, and in 2019 a tourist drowned at the crossing. Christopher's parents reached the bus for the first time a year after his death. They were dropped off by a helicopter. It was then that a memorial plaque appeared inside, and next to it, a box with an emergency supply of food for those who find themselves in trouble here. In 2020, the authorities gave up and removed the bus from the taiga with a military helicopter. Now it stands in a museum in Fairbanks, together with that very plaque. The bus returned exactly to the city from which Christopher had departed on a one-way trip. 2 tourists and 1 camera. In the evening, the dog returned home alone. On the 1st of April 2014, 2 students from the Netherlands, Chris Kremers, 21 years old, and Lisanne Vroon, 22, went for a walk along a forest trail above the Panamanian town of Boquete and took the dog of their host family with them. The girls had come for a few weeks, hikes and volunteer work with local children. The trail is called El Pianista and leads to the ridge that divides the continent in half. On one side, water flows down into the Pacific Ocean, on the other, into the Atlantic. People walk to the observation point on the ridge in a couple of hours, and the daytime photographs show an ordinary walk. Chris and Lisanne smile, pose, climb to the peak. And then, judging by the pictures, they go further, down the other side of the ridge to where the marked route ends and the real jungles begin. By nightfall, the dog ran back without them. The next morning, the girls did not show up for an excursion, and the family raised the alarm. The town and the surrounding forests were combed far and wide. The police, the Panamanian Civil Defense Service, local guides, helicopters with thermal imagers. The parents flew in from the Netherlands and brought search teams with specially trained dogs with them. The families offered a reward for any information about their daughters. Nothing. Not a single clue. 10 weeks passed. And then, on the 14th of June, a local resident brought a backpack to the police. According to her words, it was lying on the bank of a river, and moreover in a place that had been searched before. The backpack was in decent condition, the things inside were dry. There were personal items, a little money, the phones of both girls and Lisanne's camera. The equipment was studied by both Panamanian and Dutch experts, and the phones told a story from which the investigators threw their hands up. The first call to the emergency service was made already on the 1st of April towards the evening, a few hours after the cheerful daytime photographs. Then they called again and again, from both phones in turn. Over 4 days, 77 attempts to get through. Because of the mountains and thick forest, one single call connected. It dropped after 2 seconds. On the 6th of April, someone entered the incorrect code on Chris's phone several times in a row. The owner knew the code. On the 11th of April, both devices ran out of battery forever. The camera turned out to be even stranger. The first frames from the 1st of April are ordinary, trail, smiles, views. Then the smiles disappear from the faces. And then goes a series shot on the 8th of April between 1 and 4 in the morning, on the 7th night after setting out. About 90 flashes in 3 hours, on average a frame every 2 minutes. Branches, rocks, a makeshift marker made of a stick and a bag, possibly to mark their location from the air. Wrappers laid out on a rock, the back of Chris's head, and for the entire night series, not a single face. There is a version that the flash served the girls both as a flashlight and a distress signal at the same time. Several frames are pointed straight into the black sky. The remains of both were later found in the same area, down the river. Not much, a few dozen bones, Lisanne's boot, with the remains of a foot inside. The identity was confirmed by deoxyribonucleic acid. Lisanne's bones looked as they should after months in the jungle. Chris's pelvic bone, no, unnaturally white, as if bleached, without a single trace of time. And her clothes lay neatly folded by the river. Who folded them? No one has answered. Next, versions. The simplest. The girls crossed the ridge, descended in the wrong direction, and got lost. After that, they most likely went along the river. This is how people usually try to come out to civilization. Only in the jungles a river leads through cliffs and rapids. The result, death from exhaustion, and the remains were dragged away by animals and water. The river and the sun, forensic experts say, are capable of bleaching a bone, against a guide who had been leading groups there for years. Getting lost on a marked trail, according to his words, is almost impossible. There is a darker version. One frame is missing on the memory card. The camera numbers pictures sequentially, and photo number 509, taken somewhere between the daytime series and the night one, was deleted by someone. The girls did not delete a single other frame for the entire trip. What was on 509? They failed to recover the frame. No data was left. Defenders of the accident version offer a boring explanation. During a glitch, the camera itself can skip a number, and then there was no deletion at all. It is impossible to verify this anymore. Suspicion also fell on that very guide. After the disappearance, for some reason, he spent half an hour in the girl's room. And later, he himself found a part of the remains. Too lucky for a stranger, some said. Ordinary help to the investigation, others answered. Years later, the only crushing review of his tours surfaced on the internet. A woman wrote that the guide aggressively flirted and made bad jokes about machetes. This was written several years after the disappearance, and the author could have been anyone. Even an ordinary troll. Charges were never brought against the guide. There is no evidence against him. Over these years, the case has become overgrown with forums of tens of thousands of pages, documentary series, and podcasts. By the number of breakdowns on the internet, it is compared to the highest-profile disappearances of the century. In 2022, two Dutch journalists released an investigation book. They took the case apart anew, talked with the participants of the searches, and came to a conclusion: an accident, without anyone's malicious intent. But an official full stop in the case has not yet been set. 12 years later, everything runs into four things that no single version explains entirely: the white bones, the folded clothes, the deleted frame, and the dozens of night photographs on which there is not a single face. The El Pianista Trail, meanwhile, is still open to this day, and tourists walk on it every day, many precisely because of this story. 5 frames, and each one is closer. On the 21st of September 2014, 5 students from Rutgers University went out of town. Apshawa Preserve in West Milford, New Jersey State, an hour's drive from New York, trails, a pond, pines, benches by the water. With them, water and protein bars. A regular Sunday walk, of which there are hundreds there every weekend. This preserve is small, a little over 2 square kilometers, and people go there in families. They noticed the bear from a distance. Black, large. It would later be revealed that it weighed about 135 kilograms. 22-year-old Darsh Patel took out his phone and started filming. In total, he managed to take 5 frames. The guys at first tried to make noise and wave their arms. That is what all guidebooks advise to do, and almost always it works. And in every subsequent frame, the bear is closer than in the previous one. It does not run away, does not graze, does not turn away. It walks toward the camera. When about 5 meters remained to the beast, the guys started to run. In a panic, they scattered in different directions. Gathering at the exit of the forest, the guys realized that Darsh was missing and called the police. He was found 2 hours later. The bear all this time remained close to the body, walking in circles about 30 meters away, and did not leave until it was driven away. Police officers and environmental agency staff found the beast next to the body and shot it. The autopsy confirmed it was exactly the bear that killed him. Human traces were also on its paws. In the official message of the local police chief Timothy Storbeck, it is stated evenly and without emotions. A group of 5 people met a black bear in the forest. It followed them. The people got scared and ran. Specialists who analyzed this case called the behavior of the beast predatory. This is how a bear behaves not with a human, but with prey. Black bears are almost always more cowardly than they seem. They feed at garbage dumps, climb country verandas, and run away from a dog. Usually it happens exactly like this. New Jersey has one of the densest populations of black bears in the country. Encounters with them are routine, and almost always the beast leaves first. This one did not leave, and it had already been seen that day. Locals had met it a few hours before the incident. It was wandering and looking for food. There was no provocation. The students were simply taking photos. For the state, this turned out to be the first case of human death from a bear in a century and a half of observations. Before that, attacks ended with a scare, and, in the worst case, a hospital visit. Darsh's phone was found next to him. Bite marks remained on the casing. That is exactly why the 5 photographs survived at all, and became the only evidence of what happened on the trail. They look worse than any chronicle. A regular forest photo, then a bit closer, then even closer. After this incident in New Jersey, they started arguing anew about what to do with the population. Bear hunting was alternately banned and brought back, and every decision was accompanied by courts and rallies. Specialists later repeated the exact same rule. When meeting a bear, do not run, do not look in the eyes, back away slowly, and speak in a low voice. One of them added an honest phrase, saying this is much easier than doing it. A family photo in the cabin. A father photographed his wife and daughter immediately after boarding the plane. An ordinary shot of those that are taken by the thousands. Cramped seats, the daughter on her mother's lap, both are smiling. In a few hours, they will be gone. On the 17th of July 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 took off from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. 11 and a half hours of travel, a Boeing 377, 298 people on board, 17 citizenships. Almost 200 of them were citizens of the Netherlands, 80 children. They were flying on vacation, July, holidays, the resort season. On board were also those who were flying for work. Several people were heading to an international conference on combating AIDS in Melbourne, among them, one of the world's leading researchers of this disease. In that photograph, Dave and Kim Halley and their 4-year-old daughter, Megan. The shot is ordinary to the point of banality. The cabin, seatbelts, cramped. The daughter is pressed against her mom. A Canadian-Dutch family, a dream vacation in Malaysia, which they had been talking about for a long time. The photograph was taken by the father, and this is the last thing he captured in his life. A few hours after takeoff over the east of Ukraine, the plane was shot down by an anti-aircraft missile. It fell apart in the air at an altitude of about 10 kilometers. The wreckage fell in a field. Bags, books, children's toys lay among the sunflowers, and these shots flew around the whole world on the same day. The relatives of the Halleys later told journalists the same thought. It is good that they were together, and that the last photograph turned out happy. Kim's sister said that in that moment they truly felt good. Megan's grandfather could not hold back on camera. To the question of whether he blames someone, he answered that he blames the person who pressed the button, and what he would do to him if he got his hands on him. Then there was an investigation, the most massive in the history of civil aviation. The crash site was located in a combat zone, and investigators were not allowed there immediately. For the first weeks, the wreckage lay in the field practically without guards. The identification of the bodies stretched out for months, and the last victims were identified only years later. The wreckage was eventually collected and taken to the Netherlands, where the front part of the fuselage was reassembled from thousands of fragments, in life-size, on a metal frame. It was exactly this structure that showed where the missile came from. The hull was slashed from the outside by hundreds of striking elements of a characteristic shape. In the autumn of 2015, the Dutch Safety Board published a report. The warhead detonated to the left and above the cockpit. The crew died instantly. In November 2022, a court in the Netherlands sentenced 3 people in absentia to life imprisonment, 2 military men and an intelligence officer. Not one of them ever appeared in the courtroom. Investigators stated that they have grounds to suspect an even higher level of decision-making, but there was not enough evidence for new charges, and in February 2023, this part of the work was closed. In May 2025, the Council of the International Civil Aviation Organization recognized Russia as responsible for the destruction of the flight. Moscow denies responsibility. The relatives of the victims had been seeking these decisions for 10 years and continue to seek them to this day. Every year, they gather in July at the memorial, read out loud the 298 names, and this takes about half an hour. A memorial grove grows in a park near Amsterdam, 298 trees, one for each person. Between them, a ribbon of soil is laid out, and from a height, it forms a ribbon tied around a green field. 3 trees in this grove stand together. A dandelion behind the ear. He asked a friend to take a picture of him on the phone. In the first frame, the 15-year-old guy has a dandelion behind his ear. In the second, he flexes his bicep and laughs at the camera. Boyish posturing, nothing more. 10 minutes remain until his death. The 12th of May 2017, Friday. A park on King Street in Nepean. This is a district of Ottawa. An ordinary city playground, grass, benches, a soccer field. Garrett Mills with his girlfriend and best friend are killing time after school. In the evening, he and his girlfriend have their first real date. They're going to the movies, and before the showing, they needed to occupy a couple of hours with something. Later, she would pass on to his father the words that Garrett said to her that day. This is the best day of his life. 10 minutes after these shots, he walks up to the soccer goal and starts doing pull-ups on the crossbar, a common thing, to show off in front of a girl. The goal tips over and falls. The crossbar hits him on the head. Death occurs instantly. This will later be confirmed by the medical report. Then begins the reason why this story was remembered at all and why I included it here. The father, Dave Mills, looks into what kind of goal this was. The model is old, heavy, almost all the weight is at the top, about 90 kilograms. It is as if a grown man, having accelerated from a 2-meter height, fell on his head. And the main thing, the structure was not secured to the ground in any way, it just stood there. The father will tell journalists that he feels anger. The most precious thing was taken from him, and this happened without any necessity. He never thought that a harmless park is capable of killing. That goal was removed on the same day and replaced with another, secured with anchors. Garrett's father stated that he is not looking for someone's blood, but wants to know exactly who overlooked it. Was there not enough money? Did they forget? Or did they simply not care? This story has a prequel, and it explains why the father did not back down. In 2003, in the state of Illinois, exactly the same unsecured goal, weighing about 80 kilograms, fell on 6-year-old Zachary Tran. His parents achieved a state law that is called exactly that, Zach's Law. According to it, all soccer goals in Illinois must be either anchored or designed in such a way that they cannot be tipped over. Such cases in North America are counted in the tens, and almost always children die. Garrett's father also ensured that the city checked the structures on other playgrounds. The story spread through Canadian news, and spread further because it turned out that coaches and parents simply do not think about this risk. Goals stand on every school field. They look like part of the landscape, and it never occurs to anyone that they can fall. One could never guess it from these 2 photographs. The guy with the dandelion behind his ear was going to the movies in the evening. "11 Days on the Ridge." It all started with a failure to appear in court. Not with a shootout, not with politics, with a piece of paper for which a man did not show up. Randy Weaver lived with his wife and 4 children on the Ruby Ridge in Idaho, in a house without electricity and running water. He did not trust the state, believed that the world was coming to an end, and kept away from people. The house on the ridge was a way for him to withdraw from society completely. His views were harsh, and he had no intention of hiding them. In 1991, he was charged with the illegal manufacture of weapons. He did not show up for the hearing in February, for the next one in March either. Due to the failure to appear in court, a siege began. In August 1992, a group of federal marshals approached the house. The Weaver's dog rushed at them. It was shot. A firefight began. Marshal William Deegan was killed. and the weaver's 14-year-old son Sammy was killed, according to the official version he fired first. But who pulled the trigger earlier is still disputed to this day. The next day, FBI sniper Lon Horiuchi took up a position. He fired at a family friend, Kevin Harris. The bullet missed the target and hit the door of the house. Behind the door stood Vicki Weaver, Randy's wife. She was holding her 10-month-old daughter in her arms. Vicki died on the spot. The girl was unharmed. The siege lasted 11 days. Hundreds of law enforcement officers, armored vehicles, and helicopters were drawn to the foot of the ridge. And on the other side of the cordon gathered a crowd of sympathizers and simply onlookers who stood watch there for days. The standoff could have dragged on even longer. It was resolved not by special forces, but by a civilian negotiator, Bo Gritz. He convinced Randy to bring out the body of his wife, hand over the severely wounded Harris to the rescuers, and surrender himself. The case reached the court and became one of the most high-profile in the history of Americans' relations with federal agencies. The family's lawyer, Jerry Spence, dismantled the sniper's actions point by point. Shooting at an armed adult without a warning to surrender contradicts the Constitution. They shot when the men were already retreating to the house, that is, falling back. And third, the fire was directed at a door behind which the shooter could not know who was standing. The court agreed with this. Randy Weaver was acquitted of the main charges. He served time only for that very failure to appear. The state paid him and his 3 daughters $3,100,000. Kevin Harris received $380,000, partly so that he would withdraw a $10 million lawsuit. Ruby Ridge did not remain a local story. Films were made about the ridge, books were written, and the name entered the U.S. political vocabulary as a designation of what a forceful resolution to a minor problem ends in. Half a year later, there was the siege in Waco. Another 2 years later, the bombing in Oklahoma City. And for a whole stratum of people, this aligned into one single line. The Senate held hearings in 1995 and analyzed minute by minute who gave the order to shoot without warning and on what basis. The wording was recognized as not complying with the law. The FBI rewrote the rules for the use of weapons, and the name Horiuchi became a symbol of how the agency handles its own mistakes. Charges were brought against him, but the case did not reach a verdict. The last photo of Vicki Weaver is an ordinary family snapshot. A woman who moved to live in the mountains and raised children there is photographed the way everyone is photographed, looking at the lens and smiling slightly. She stepped out that door to see what was happening outside. Randy Weaver lived for another 30 years and died in 2022. The Tamburello Corner. That weekend in Imola started badly long before the final race. On Friday, Rubens Barrichello crashed, flew off, and survived by a miracle. On Saturday, during qualifying, the Austrian Roland Ratzenberger died. Racers had not seen death at the stages for 12 years, and suddenly everything happened at once. Sid Watkins, the chief doctor of the championship, that evening directly persuaded Senna to quit racing. "You have everything. Let's go fishing instead." Senna replied that he could not stop, that he was obliged to continue. Ayrton Senna walked around the paddock heavy and silent, went to see the site of Ratzenberger's crash, and said that he did not want to start. He started anyway. Today, they talk about it as a decision he made against himself. The 1st of May 1994, the San Marino Grand Prix, the 7th lap, he is running first. The Tamburello Corner, a long left curve that is taken almost at full throttle. The car does not turn. It goes in a straight line, off the track, toward the concrete wall. The telemetry and tapes were analyzed for years, frame by frame. The instruments showed these figures. Before the corner, Senna was going at a speed of about 310 kilometers per hour, managed to brake sharply and downshift twice, and crashed into the wall at about 210. The right front wheel, along with part of the suspension, tore off and was thrown back, straight into the helmet. The racer was killed not by the wall itself, but by this impact. The doctors got to him when his heart was still beating. The head of the Formula One medical team, Sid Watkins, who was also a friend of Senna, later recounted that they pulled him out of the cockpit and laid him on the ground, and at that moment he sighed. Watkins, a far from religious man, said that he felt how in that second his spirit departed. Who he was for racing is explained by numbers. 3 world championship titles, 1988, 1990, and 1991, 41 victories at the stages, and 65 pole positions. That is, 65 times he turned out to be the fastest in qualifying and started first. This record stood for 17 years until 2006. In races, he drove on the edge. Rivals called his style harsh and risky, and fans, the best in all history. In the rain, he won against cars deliberately stronger than his own. In his crashed car, an Austrian flag was found. Senna was going to unfurl it at the finish line, in memory of Ratzenberger, who died the day before. In Brazil, 3 days of national mourning were declared. For the country, this was not sports news. Senna was winning in those years when almost nothing was winning for the people, and his victories were perceived personally there. Millions of people came out for the funeral in São Paulo. The coffin was transported through streets packed from edge to edge. The Italian court, after a long proceeding, linked the crash to a hastily modified steering column. Sentences on the merits were never issued. The statute of limitations expired earlier. And then happened that for which this story is worth telling in full. The death of Senna turned Formula One upside down. Speeds, safety zones, track configurations, crash tests, and car designs were reviewed. Tamburello was remade into a slow combination of corners, and gravel traps and tire barriers appeared between the track and the walls. The Drivers' Association, dissolved many years ago, was reassembled right at the next stage. And after the 1st of May 1994, not a single driver died in Formula One races for more than 20 years. The next driver died in a Formula One race only 21 years later. Senna's sister founded a foundation in his name, which with his money educates children in Brazil. The count there has long gone into millions of school children. On the morning of that very 1st of May, Senna was gathering drivers to restore their union and achieve safety on the tracks. He managed to agree. He did not make it to the first meeting. The man who was made a symbol. He turned down a contract for $3,600,000 and joined the Army as a private. In America, no one does that. Pat Tillman played in the National Football League for the Arizona Cardinals club. After the attacks of the 11th of September, he submitted documents to the Army along with his brother Kevin, passed the selection for the 75th Ranger Regiment, and went first to Iraq, then to Afghanistan. He gave no interviews and avoided conversations about his act. He believed that there was nothing to tell here and refused any filming about himself. His last photograph was taken shortly before the 22nd of April 2004 in the Khost province in southeastern Afghanistan. An ordinary photograph of a soldier on an outing with his unit, tactical vest, helmet, dust. On the 22nd of April, Pat died. He was 27 years old. The Army reported a heroic version to the family and the country. Tillman was climbing up a slope under enemy fire, covering his comrades. The funeral was broadcast on television. Helicopters flew over the stadium in San Jose. He was posthumously awarded the Silver Star and promoted in rank. The president's administration used his story in support of the war, a living symbol of honor and sacrifice. A month later, the Army admitted there was no enemy nearby at all. Tillman was shot by his own people. The convoy fell into a narrow gorge. It was divided, and one part opened fire on the other. 3 bullets to the head from close range. Army doctors examining the body called the nature of the wounds suspicious precisely because of the tight grouping of the hits. There is testimony that in the last seconds he shouted who he was, trying to stop the shooting. Then, for 7 years, the family sought the truth. 7 internal investigations, 2 hearings in Congress. Each new proceeding began with the previous one being deemed incomplete. The mother, Mary Tillman, spoke briefly about the military. The man did not interest them. They appropriated his reputation for themselves and then abandoned him himself. Brother Kevin, who served in the same unit, spoke before congressmen in 2007 and explained the essence. When the facts ceased to align with the official version, another one was composed for the country. The deception, according to his words, was an insult to the family, but it was not conceived for the sake of the family. An entire nation was being misled, a separate detail that the family could not forgive. Tillman's uniform, body armor, and personal notes were burned even before the investigation began. Brother Kevin was in the same convoy that day, just a few vehicles behind, and he was not told the truth immediately, just like everyone else. Punishments almost did not follow. Several officers received reprimands, the general responsible for the initial reports. An official censure. The Arizona Cardinals Club permanently retired his number 40 from circulation. A statue stands at the stadium, and the foundation in his name pays for the education of military personnel and their families. The count of scholarships goes into the thousands. Every April in Arizona, a memorial run is held in his memory, a distance of 4 2/10 miles, according to the number on his jersey. Tens of thousands of people gather. In that last photograph, he is still just a soldier whom no one had designated as anyone's symbol. The Thursday press conference. He handed out 3 envelopes to journalists and asked them not to come close. The 22nd of January 1987, the state legislature building in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Robert Bud Dwyer, the state treasurer, called a press conference, and everyone was certain they would hear a statement of resignation. The next morning he was supposed to hear his sentence, and he started out exemplarily. A native of Missouri since 1964, a deputy of the state's lower house, then a senator, in 1984 elected as the treasurer of Pennsylvania. He was re-elected, climbed the steps. His reputation was working and solid. Everything broke down on the most boring thing that happens in politics, on accounting. It turned out that from 1979 to 1981, the state's public employees overpaid taxes. Due to an error, money was withheld even from those who were on sick leave. It was about $40 million that had to be recalculated and returned. Dwyer gave the contract for these calculations to a small company from California for $4,600,000. The firm employed 3 full-time staff members, and no one held a tender. 2 months later, he found out that the Federal Bureau of Investigation took an interest in this company. It was suspected of bribing officials for similar contracts. Dwyer tore up the contract. Too late. His political rival had already collected the testimony of the former vice president of the firm, where it was asserted that the treasurer received a kickback of $300,000. In today's money, close to $900,000. These testimonies spread across all the state's newspapers. Dwyer never admitted guilt in anything, neither during the investigation, nor in court, nor in front of the cameras. The prosecution offered him a deal, a confession in exchange for a lenient sentence. He refused. The court found him guilty on 11 counts: conspiracy, mail fraud, perjury. He faced 55 years in prison. He described his situation as a nightmare that just would not end. On the 22nd of January, he went out to the press, read a long statement about his innocence, and in front of the cameras committed suicide. Some of Pennsylvania's television channels broadcast this live in the middle of daytime broadcasts. In some places, school news programs were running, and children saw the recording. The scandal around the broadcasters then dragged on for years. Editorial offices argued over what could even be shown on live television. He was 47 years old. In the envelopes that he had handed out beforehand lay a letter to the governor of the state. Dwyer wrote that the justice system is not working as it should and asked to appoint his wife as the acting treasurer. There was also a practical side, which was written about a lot later. He passed away while remaining in office and before the sentencing, and his family retained the right to the pension and payouts, which they would have lost after the conviction. The story received a continuation 23 years later. In 2010, the former head of that very company publicly stated that he had slandered Dwyer, gave false testimony under pressure from the investigation in order to lighten his own fate. Legally, this changed nothing. There was nothing to review and no one to do it. For Dwyer's family, this turned out to be the only thing they had been waiting for 23 years. A documentary film was made about Dwyer, and it was named without any frills. Honest Man. The camera on Cowlock Beach. On the 26th of January 2005, missionaries from Washington State were walking along a beach in Thailand. Volunteers who came to clear the aftermath. Exactly a month had passed since the catastrophe. The shore was still littered with debris. One of them, Cameron, hit something in the sand with his foot and said to his buddy, "Look, a smashed camera." The casing was flattened. Christian, that very buddy, later admitted. They picked it up without any hope, just garbage. Already in the hotel, he took out the memory card and inserted it into a pocket computer. The card worked, and on it were photographs of the beach minutes before everything happened. About the very moment of the find, he later said that it looked like a trifle that you forget about in an hour. Then it turned out otherwise. Christian described it like this: they were looking at people who are living their lives, relaxing, enjoying their vacation. And then everything cuts off in the middle, as if someone turned on someone else's voice recorder tape, and it ended in mid-sentence. These frames were shot by a Canadian couple from Vancouver, John and Jackie Nill. They constantly traveled to Thailand, called it their second home, and this time they had already been there for a long time. On the 25th of December, they called their children to congratulate them on Christmas. In the morning, on the 26th, they got up early and went to the shore with a camera to photograph the beautiful morning. The morning turned out to be strange, and almost no one understood this strangeness. The sea retreated from the shore further than ever, exposing the bottom, shells, stranded boats. All along the coast, people went out onto the wet sand and took photographs. No one, except for a counted few, understood what the receding water meant. In John and Jackie's frames, a stripe appears on the horizon. In the next photograph, it is higher, then even higher. The last frame was taken when the wave was already very close. There was no one to take pictures after it. 1,000 kilometers from them, off the coast of Sumatra, an earthquake with a magnitude of about 9 occurred that morning. The wave swept through 14 countries and killed about 230,000 people. By the number of victims, this is one of the largest catastrophes in modern history. More than 5,000 people died in Thailand, and almost half of them were foreigners. The end of December, the height of the season, hotels are packed. The Khao Lak Resort, where the Nils stood, took the blow among the first. The wave passed right through it and dragged a Marine Police Patrol boat deep inland for 2 kilometers. The boat was left lying exactly there. Now it is a monument. A tsunami warning system in the Indian Ocean simply did not exist then. It was built only after this December. Sensors on the ocean floor, buoys, and a chain of national centers started working by 2006. From Sumatra to the Thai coast, the wave traveled for about 2 hours. This time would have been more than enough to lead people away from the beaches. There was nothing to warn them with. The only ones who understood what was happening on those beaches that day were people who accidentally knew one school book sign: if the sea suddenly recedes, you have to run up. A 10-year-old English schoolgirl, Tilly Smith, remembered a geography lesson, caused a panic on a neighboring beach, and forced about 100 people to leave there. All of them survived. John and Jackie are not running in these frames. They are photographing. From the shore, the approaching wave does not look like a wall, but a stripe on the horizon, and it is visible from the photographs. The people on the beach calmly continue to stand. The Nils' children were named Patrick, David, and Christian. They could not reach their parents by phone and sent a relative to Thailand to search. John's body was found on the 31st of December, Jackie's body on the 13th of January. Identification during those weeks went hard. People were found kilometers away from the place where the wave caught them. And right here, the story comes full circle. The photographs could have disappeared forever. The camera was destroyed, lay among the garbage. It had already been kicked once. But Christian was not too lazy once more. He found the family and handed the photographs over to them. One of the sons later said that it was hard to look at them and that he is glad they exist. After them, he began to sleep more peacefully. The frames showed him what no investigation would have shown. His parents could not do anything. They stood and photographed the sea in the place that they loved most of all. Write in the comments everything you think about these photographs and the people who were captured in them. And subscribe to the Top Facts channel for a selection of the most incredible facts and videos from all over the internet. Thank you all very much for watching, and right now watch our previous incredible episodes that have already appeared on your screen.